I stood in the middle of that crowded cafe, his laughter echoing in my ears, laughter not meant for me, but for someone else. My trembling hands clutched the letter I'd written, never to be given. Sometimes, the deepest love becomes the cruelest humiliation, leaving scars words cannot hide. Welcome to the Untold Love, where hearts speak their truths. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories keep this journey alive. I never believed in love at first sight. It always felt like something pulled out of a movie, too perfect, too scripted to exist in real life. But then came Daniel. The first time I saw him, it wasn't fireworks or thunder in the sky, it was something quieter, something deeper. It was the way he noticed me when no one else did. I was sitting at the corner of that library cafe, sketching in my notebook, lost in a world of pencil lines and shading. And out of all the noise and chatter, his eyes found me. Not just a glance, not just a passing look, but a pause. A moment. He walked over, holding his coffee, and instead of brushing past, he asked me about my drawing. His voice had this warmth to it, like he genuinely wanted to know. I remember feeling my cheeks burn because no one had ever asked me about the things I quietly loved. Most people looked at me and saw someone reserved, maybe even shy, but he looked deeper. From that day, our conversations began in fragments, small, almost ordinary exchanges about books, music, favorite places. But each word carried weight, as though we were weaving a string between us without realizing it. And before I knew it, those fragments turned into late-night messages, into laughter that slipped past midnight, into this feeling I couldn't quite name but felt all the way down to my soul. Daniel had this way of making the simplest things feel special. A walk through the park wasn't just a walk, it became a story, a memory, a moment I'd tuck away in my heart. The sound of his laughter felt like the kind of song you never forget. And the way he looked at me. It was as if I mattered in ways I never thought I could. I, who had always been cautious with love, began to dream. I began to hope. And in those early days, hope was enough to make my world brighter. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone who could see me, not as a background character in life's story, but as someone worth cherishing. It was the beginning of something beautiful. Or at least, that's what I thought. The days that followed felt like pages from a story I never wanted to end. What began as simple conversations with Daniel blossomed into something deeper, something that wrapped itself around my heart like warmth on a cold evening. He became my constant, someone whose presence felt less like an intrusion and more like coming home after being lost for too long. We spent hours together, but time always betrayed us, slipping through our fingers faster than we wished. A simple walk under gray skies turned into a memory etched forever. Rain would fall, soft and steady, and instead of rushing for shelter, Daniel would smile, tilt his head back, and laugh as if the sky itself was conspiring to make life more beautiful. I remember standing there beside him, drenched and shivering, yet somehow I had never felt warmer. He had this way of grounding me. My thoughts often raced, tangled in worries and doubts, but Daniel could silence them with just a look or a word. One evening, while sitting on a park bench under a blanket of stars, he whispered, "You don't have to pretend with me. Just be." And for the first time in my life, I felt free to let down the walls I had built so carefully around my heart. Slowly, love grew between us, not rushed, not forced, but natural, like flowers blooming with the first touch of spring. His voice became my comfort, his laughter my favorite melody, his arms my safest place. Even the quiet moments spoke volumes, those silences where nothing was said but everything was felt. Friends began to notice how my eyes lit up whenever his name was mentioned, how my smile carried something softer, sweeter. They teased me, but I didn't mind. Because for the first time, I wasn't just existing, I was living, breathing in moments I had once thought belonged only to others. With Daniel, the world seemed lighter, dreams seemed closer, and my heart dared to believe in forever. I had always imagined love as complicated, a storm to weather. But with him, it felt simple. It felt safe. It felt like home. And yet, even in the comfort of that home, I sometimes caught a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation I couldn't quite name. But back then, I ignored it. Because in my heart, love was enough to make everything else disappear. At first, the doubts were whispers, so faint I almost convinced myself they didn't exist. Daniel was still there, still laughing with me, still holding my hand as if I belonged. But every now and then, there were moments. Moments that didn't feel the same. One evening, I called him, excited to share something I had written in my journal. He answered, but his tone was distracted, his words clipped. And then I heard it, soft laughter in the background, a kind of laughter that didn't belong to me. I froze, listening, my heart thudding in my chest. When I asked who he was with, his voice turned light, almost too casual. "Just a friend," he said. The word tasted bitter, even though I tried to swallow it. After that, I began noticing little things. Messages left unread for hours when before he couldn't go a minute without replying. Plans that were suddenly cancelled with vague excuses. His eyes, once steady on me, now seemed to drift away as though he was somewhere else, someone else. But then he'd return with that same charm, that same smile, and all my doubts would melt into guilt. Maybe it's me, I thought. Maybe I'm asking for too much, holding on too tightly. I wanted to believe in him so badly that I ignored the knots forming in my chest. Still, my heart knew. It knew in the way silence grew heavier between us. It knew in the way his touch sometimes felt absent, as if his body was there but his soul had already walked away. Nights became restless. I would lie awake, replaying our conversations, searching for clues in his words, wondering if the love I felt was slipping through cracks I couldn't close. I told myself that love was supposed to be patient, that doubts were just shadows passing by. But these shadows grew darker, clinging closer, whispering truths I wasn't ready to face. And no matter how much I tried to silence them, they refused to leave. It was the first time I felt afraid, not of losing him, but of losing myself in the process of holding on. The truth revealed itself on a night I least expected, like a storm breaking on a clear sky. A friend had invited me to a small gathering, music, laughter, the kind of warmth that usually felt safe. I went, hoping Daniel and I would find comfort in each other again, that maybe the shadows of doubt would finally fade. But what I saw that night shattered everything. Across the room, there he was. Daniel. His arm draped effortlessly around another woman, his eyes glowing with a softness I once thought belonged only to me. She leaned into him, and he didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled in the way that had once undone me, the way that had once made me believe in forever. In that moment, the world blurred. The voices around me turned into muffled echoes. My chest tightened, and the letter I had written for him, tucked safely in my bag, waiting for the right time, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, as whispers rippled through the room. Some eyes glanced toward me, pity softening their expressions, while others looked away as if my pain was too sharp to witness. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But instead, I stood still, my heart breaking silently in the crowd. It wasn't just betrayal I felt, it was humiliation. The kind that burns your soul, that makes you feel exposed, foolish, unworthy. Later that night, alone in my room, I reread every message, every promise he had ever sent. Words that once lit up my days now cut me open with their emptiness. Was it all a lie? I wondered. Or had I simply loved too deeply, too recklessly, while he remained untouched? Tears blurred the ink on my letter, the one I never gave him. Every line I had written, every truth, every dream, was now nothing more than ashes on paper. And yet, somewhere inside the wreckage, a voice whispered, "This is not the end of you. This is only the breaking." But in that moment, all I could feel was the sting of betrayal. And the crushing weight of a love I thought was mine. I couldn't carry the weight of silence anymore. My heart was drowning in questions, and the only person who could answer them was the very one who had broken it. So I called Daniel. My hands trembled, my voice almost cracked, but he agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the kind of place where we had once laughed until our stomachs hurt. Now, the air between us was heavy, almost suffocating. I looked at him, those familiar eyes, that smile I had once memorized, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. Why? My voice barely escaped my lips. Just one word, but it carried everything, the love I had given, the trust one had built, the pieces of me I had handed over without hesitation. He didn't look away. Instead, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma," he began, his tone soft but sharp enough to wound, "I never meant to hurt you. But I couldn't feel what you felt. You loved me too deeply, and I couldn't keep up. It scared me." Those words pierced deeper than any lie could have. I wasn't wrong, he had seen my love, felt it, but instead of cherishing it, he had rejected it. As if my heart, in its fullness, was too much. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Too deeply?" I whispered. "All I did was love you. With honesty. With everything I had." He nodded slowly, almost regretfully, but there was no redemption in his gaze. Just distance. Just finality. In that moment, I broke, not because he didn't love me, but because I realized I had given him the most fragile part of myself, and he had treated it like a burden. I stood up, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "You may see my love as too much," I told him, "but one day, you'll realize it was everything you never deserved." And with that, I walked away. Each step felt like shards of glass beneath my feet, but they were steps nonetheless, steps away from him and closer, perhaps, to myself. It was the breaking point. And yet, hidden in the pain, was the faintest whisper of freedom. The days after walking away felt endless, as though time itself had slowed just to remind me of my emptiness. Mornings were the hardest, waking up and remembering that Daniel was no longer mine. I would reach for my phone, instinctively waiting for his good morning message, only to be met with silence. That silence was deafening. At first, I let myself drown in it. I cried until there were no tears left. I replayed every memory, every word, searching for the exact moment when love had slipped through my fingers. The pain was unbearable, but in that pain, something began to stir. A realization. A truth I had overlooked: my love, as deep and consuming as it was, had never been wasted. So I turned to the one thing that had always been mine, my journal. Night after night, I poured myself onto the pages, bleeding ink instead of tears. What had once been letters for Daniel became poems for myself. I wrote about the way the rain had felt with him, the laughter we shared, the silence that grew between us. And slowly, through words, I began to stitch myself back together. It wasn't quick. Healing never is. But somewhere between the loneliness and the writing, I started noticing beauty again: the orange glow of sunsets, the comfort of a quiet evening, the warmth of friends who never left my side. I realized love doesn't just live in another person. It lives in the way we choose to see the world, in the way we care for ourselves when no one else does. Daniel's rejection no longer felt like proof of my unworthiness. Instead, it became a mirror, showing me how much I was capable of giving. Yes, I had loved too deeply, but that wasn't my shame. That was my gift. A gift not everyone could hold, but one day, someone would. I began to walk lighter. The cracks in my heart remained, but through them, light poured in. And in that light, I saw myself clearly, not broken, not foolish, but whole in a way I had never known before. Healing didn't erase the wounds. It transformed them. And those wounds became the proof that even after the deepest humiliation, love, a true, fearless love, can still rise again. Standing at the edge of everything I had endured, I realized that endings are not always loud. Sometimes they arrive quietly, like a final page turning, leaving you with the weight of what's been written and the silence of what comes next. My story with Daniel had ended, not with closure from him, but with acceptance within myself. For a long time, I thought love was about holding on, about proving myself worthy enough to stay in someone's life. But what Daniel's betrayal taught me is that love isn't about begging for a place in someone else's heart, it's about knowing the worth of your own. Yes, I was humiliated. Yes, I was broken. But I was also alive, breathing, and learning that a broken heart can still beat. And with every beat, it grows stronger, wiser, softer in the right places and tougher in others. Pain had stripped me bare, but in its aftermath, I found something I never expected: peace. I began to understand that the depth of my love was never the problem. It was a reflection of my soul, of the way I felt the world so deeply. Daniel couldn't hold it, couldn't honor it, but that didn't make it less valuable. If anything, it made me see how extraordinary it was to carry a love so vast. Now, when I think of him, it no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a chapter, a necessary one that shaped me, that broke me, but also rebuilt me. I carry no hatred, only a quiet gratitude for the lessons hidden in the hurt. One day, maybe, someone will come along who can meet my depth with their own. Someone who won't be afraid of the way I love. But even if that day never comes, I know I will be okay. Because I have myself, and I have learned that is enough. So this is where my story ends. Not with regret, not with longing, but with hope. Hope that love, even when it fails us, can still teach us how to rise, how to heal, and how to keep believing in the beauty of the heart. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending of all.